right, everybody, welcome this evening. Another version of StratiVentures industry webinar. We actually have Eric Christie of Boxer Inspections. He's the StratiVentures, as I would call, resident inspector guru. A lot of our members reach out to Eric all the time via Podio and get those crazy questions answered, like, does this look normal to you? And,
For investors, yes, it does.
Yeah, so they send you pictures, and it's a lot of live chat that you interact with them, because a lot of times when they're out on the properties, Eric, your help and your information is very, very vital to the decisions they make. And one of the main topics that we're going to be talking about this evening, obviously, is winterizing your investment property. So guys, today's a very good opportunity for you to ask questions. And so right now we're doing the welcome, and we're going to introduce the speaker here. And around 7:10, he'll open it up to any type of attendee questions and answers. So we really, really emphasize on asking questions. For those of you that are joining us via Zoom, just remember that there's buttons down at the bottom. Your main one is, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A in order for the panelists and ourselves as moderators that we can go ahead and log those and make sure that they get answered. They usually get lost in the chat because there's a lot of back and forth, but definitely put your Q&As into your questions into the Q&A section. If you want to go ahead and leave, feel free to hit the end button right there, and that'll go ahead and end your session, guys. Also, remember, Oriana's putting some information out there in order for you guys to continue to follow us and be a participant. So let's start off here with our StratiVentures free one-on-one session webpage. It's called www.investorrealestatetraining.com. This is an amazing landing page that Oriana's been working on for us. Go visit it, take a look, everything about SVI and how we can best help you guys in your real estate investing world. And now about Eric Christie, our speaker. So Eric, you're a professional home inspector. Your company is called Boxer Inspections, and that 22974, I'm assuming, is a residential inspection license number?
Yep, for Trek.
For Trek, awesome. Your formal education, mechanical engineering, technology, and technical writing. As I know for a fact, when you give us inspection reports on our properties, when we buy them and when we sell them, man, talk about good information. I mean, no stone is left unturned. And also, you started this home inspection business after 26 years in the semiconductor and oil field industry. So would you say that this was kind of in the same realm, logistical and detail orientated, or are you saying that this was just a completely change of business?
I think when you start your own business, when we talk about investors, you have to have a mindset change. And to start your own business, you have to stop thinking about an 8 to 5 employee and start thinking of it as being an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Once you flip that switch in your mind, everywhere you look, everything you see is an opportunity, either for you or somebody else. But you just see those opportunities. And I think the education and the industry experience certainly prepared me for what I'm doing now. But you've got to get that mindset change.
I love it. We get some SVI members that will call us, especially right now because of the downturn and COVID and oil companies. They'll call me and say, Diego, I've got bad news. And I'm like, okay, what's the bad news? Well, the bad news is they just got laid off. Well, I tell them, no, that's phenomenal news, because you just got promoted to 24/7. And they're like, what? I'm like, well, you get to spend time building yourself. So you're also a member and a contributor of the NACHI and the Texas InterNACHI Professional Real Estate Inspectors Association. What is the importance about those two organizations?
The Texas Professional Real Estate is basically our voice in Texas for real estate inspectors. InterNACHI is a national organization for home inspectors. They do a lot of training. To get your license in Texas, you can either get it from one of the local Texas outlets, or you can get it from InterNACHI. And so InterNACHI also provides training for a lot of other states in the U.S. And it's very similar to kind of what you're doing, is that you have this online training that you can go through, and they just continue to add more stuff to it. So there's continuing education with it, but it's a recognized authority in the field nationally. And that I think is important.
Awesome. That's great, because, real estate and obviously inspections is an ever-changing industry here. You speak at a lot of real estate investment meetings. You educate investors and realtors on the importance of accurate repair estimates and inspections. That's huge, because when you agree that right now in the world of real estate investing, there's a very high percentage of people that are looking at properties without the right tools, without the right affiliate or the right person in which they need to align themselves with, because it's super high risk.
Yeah, and one of the things that as investors in your training and other trainings that you and I have taken is that they teach you that you don't need to be that expert. You just need to know enough to know how to recognize the right people and get those people on your contact list or your payroll or your quick dial, so that you don't have to be the expert anymore, that you call that individual and you ask for their help and their services, and they go provide it, and then it's no longer your responsibility to go do those things. Yes, you need an accurate repair estimate, and you can do that if you have the other information, but walking a property for an hour, that's whatever your time is worth, $100 an hour, $150 an hour, however you want to put that. If you can get somebody else to do that, and you can be in your office and put together your rehab estimate and your statement of work from other information very quickly, then you're moving on to the next property. Now I can get back to my marketing. Now I can get back to talking to the sellers and convincing them that they need to sell me their house.
Absolutely, and that's one of the main reasons why I believe SVI thrives in this industry, is because we vet out for a lot of our members those components. We know the right questions to ask. We know the right temperature
Yep.
in which those conversations, and vetting them out. So we know that even some of our members in other states and other cities, they know they're getting that support. They have that person in their corner asking those questions. Hence, that's why when we talk to you, Eric, you're actually an SVI member. And as an SVI member, you know the right questions that even somebody outside of the state of Texas, if they were to have a conversation with you, you would basically tell them, look for this, look for this, look for that. These are main questions, because you believe in the whole environment of good real estate practice, which we commend you for that.
Yeah, and I think that even if whether you're in real estate, or you have your own business, no matter what it is, if you're an entrepreneur with a contract service or selling a product, you're going to have people that you need to help you with that business. And as I've told a lot of investors before, it's not just contractors and realtors and things like that. You need a CPA, you need a bookkeeper, you need an attorney, you need somebody who's going to print your shirts, and those are all important people to have within your sphere of contacts, and that's something that you just got to get.
Absolutely, we're in their corner. And also, Eric, you are an investor yourself, and
Yep.
that's another way of looking at the property, where you're not looking at it as if, okay, I'm here just to fill a ticket or an order. I'm also here to kind of give you my 2 cents, stating what the risk level of this is, which is phenomenal, I believe.
Yeah, and certainly based upon the exit strategy for the investor.
Yep. So the key points that you want to touch tonight, make sure we're covering those, are going to be the precautions, preparing for winter, any kind of plumbing work, and heating systems and roofing. Am I correct? And any
Yeah,
additional add-ons?
the heating, I thought about this a bit more, and I thought I communicated to Oriana, but I guess I didn't. I want to cover foundations instead of heating systems.
Sure.
We're all going to talk just briefly about heaters, but I think foundations, especially in the climates up north where they're dealing with basements, there's some special precautions that folks need to make sure that they're aware of if they're either moving to that area or they're working with that area and they're having investment properties or even their personal property. All of this can apply.
All right. So with that said, guys, let's go ahead and let's get Eric started with his presentation. So feel free to go ahead and share your screen.
Okay.
And as normal, welcome, sir, and we look forward to your great information.
All right, folks, welcome. My name is Eric Christie with Boxer Inspections, as Diego had indicated. I'm a residential home inspector, but part of my business is devoted to investors to help them understand what the condition of the home is before they buy it. You make your money when you buy the house, not when you sell it. And having somebody that can help you to not overlook some type of repair that's in the home is certainly helpful for what you're doing when you're moving forward. And again, you don't have to be the expert. Always hire the people that can be the expert for you, and you don't have to know all this stuff. And you just need to be aware of it and have some idea of what that individual is supposed to be providing with you, so you recognize the value in it. So for what I wanted to talk about today, we're talking about the winterization process when winter comes in and when we start to have to make some special precautions. And I thought it was appropriate to change from the heating system to the foundations, and then also look at roofs and plumbing. And I'm going to go through this pretty quick, but as Diego indicated, if you have questions, put it in the Q&A. Be happy to answer them after the fact. Some of this may be, things that you may have heard of before. I think a lot of this is just common sense, but in some cases, people just don't think about it or they forget to think about it, and something gets forgotten and they have a problem with it. So for most of the country, we deal with three types of foundations. Ones that have basements, ones that have pier and beam, and those are two of the ones that we're going to focus on today. And then the slab foundation, or slab on grade, is what it's called. And where we do have that in all climates, the one of the aspects of electrical and plumbing in the construction industry is there's a requirement in the residential code that says that they must, particularly plumbing, must be buried a minimum of 12 inches below the frost line. And the frost line varies on the location in the country, and it has to do with how deep below the surface of the soil the ground actually freezes. So up north, the frost line is a lot deeper. So to protect pipes, you have to bury them a lot deeper than we do here in the South, where it rarely freezes. And if it does freeze for a couple of days, the frost line is maybe a few inches below the soil. But in our area, which is in the Houston area, it gets cold down here for a couple of days and then it warms back up. And so it's usually not an issue. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. So when we talk about foundations, we're talking about basements and crawl spaces in this case. And so these are a list of things that you want to do around the house, whether it's an investment property, whether it's your personal property. And if it's investment property, you always have to consider this because maybe the power is not going to be on, or maybe the utilities are only going to be on up to a certain point where the valve is at and you have it turned off, but it's not. You're doing plumbing work inside the house, for example. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But the other thing you want to do is make sure that your basements and your crawl spaces are sealed up. And a couple of reasons for that is, one, we want to keep the environment out, which is the snow and wind and any rain that may be occurring in the climate, but we also want to keep animals out. So a lot of people forget about that the animals are looking for a place to shelter for the winter as well. And they're looking for some place that's warm, dry, maybe have some food and have some water. And so basements and crawl spaces underneath the pier and beam house make good places for them to live. And if you have a deck or something outside, those can also be a location for them to want to set up shop. So in the pictures we show here, obviously you see somebody that's raking the vegetation away from the house. And in several of the pictures, those openings in the middle pictures, those are actually openings where somebody had observed rodents entering the structure. So this is going into the basement or going into the crawl space. And then up in the northern climates, they have window wells, which provide ventilation and windows to a finished or an unfinished basement. And then the middle picture on the bottom is a crawl space entrance point. And so if that's left open, then you can get water, debris, vegetation, and animals that can get under the house. And you certainly don't want that. Finally, is just sealing up the house. So places where water can enter the home is always something you should be on the lookout for, whether it's your personal home or your investment property, because consider the water as the enemy of the home. Anything you can do to get it out, keep it out of the house is going to be important and helpful in the long run. And so basement foundation issues. So let's talk about that real quick. So when you have basements, and if you have some issues on the outside of the home, the water pressure that's in the soil can cause problems with the foundation walls in the basement. And if you have live in an area where you have a deep frost line, so it gets cold and it stays cold. So we're talking about the northern states where it stays cold for months below freezing. That pressure, the water expands and it can also put pressure on the foundation and cause it to crack. And so these pictures are showing whether you're getting some water entry in the lower right-hand corner, and you're also getting some crack and some damage on the walls, which can push in the foundation and either let water in or can start to remove the structure integrity of the home. And then finally, if we have water that's in there and it's allowed to stay wet and damp for a long period of time, you can have microbial growth. And that's when we start getting issues with mold and fungus, in which case you have to have those tested to find out whether you have an issue like that. It's not just, oh yeah, the wall is dark, I must have some sort of microbial issue or something of that nature. And then the freezing temps can cause issues around the window if you have a high snow line or something of that nature. And if you have a basement, you're typically going to have a sump pump down there. And if the temperatures drop and the water in the pump freezes, then you can break the pump. So then when it goes to start pumping, instead of pumping water out of the basement sump like it's supposed to, it's just pumping the water right back into the hole. So when we have crawl spaces, this is when you have a pier and beam foundation, or you have a what's known as a concrete perimeter foundation, which goes around the outside of the house. And then you have columns or piers underneath the home that are required to support the internal structure of the home. You want to seal these up for the same reason we talked about before. But in these cases, you need to have a moisture barrier on the soil that prevents water and moisture from coming up into the soil, because if it doesn't freeze, then any of that moisture that's in them is going to rise up into the soil and create a moist environment. If you do that, the framing can get wet. You're back to that microbial growth again, and you can also get wood fungus to start to grow. And the wood fungus is actually what damages wood framing and trees and logs and stuff like that you see on the ground outside. The other thing that's important in a pier and beam house is you should have insulation underneath the floor. And if you have insulation in there, you're required to have a vapor retarder on the bottom of the floor to prevent airflow. That's the vapor retarder, to slow the process of air and moisture from moving through to the structure of the home. So even it may be a little bit moist between the ground and the vapor retarder, you want to have a barrier there that helps to prevent that from happening. And these are required. These are required. We see this a lot, or I see this a lot down here in Houston, where this is missing on older homes. But in the wintertime, you're walking on that floor and it's cold. And that's why, is because there's no insulation and there's no vapor retarder. And that affects the heating and cooling, the heating and cooling in the home, and your ability to have a comfortable, habitable space. So moving right along, so let's talk about the plumbing. So the water lines, as we indicated, and before, I think I said 12 inches, it's actually 6 inches below the water line. And the reference standard there is R 403.1. And then the parentheses indicate that that's either a chart or a picture in the IRC, which is the International Residential Code. The picture I'm showing in there is that basically what the bury depth of water lines are based upon the location in the United States. So you can see down here in the Houston area, we just have to bury the minimum depth is about 5 inches below the top of the soil. But up there in Bismarck, North Dakota, it's about 80 inches below the soil. So that's about 6 feet. And so actually 6 feet, 8 inches. So you have to bury the water pipes pretty deep up in the northern climates to prevent them from freezing. And this would be the pipes that are coming from the water service and to the home. And once we get into the home, we're going to discuss a little bit more about that. And our focus for our concern, whether you have your personal home or you have an investment property, is if you have the opportunity in your investment properties, take a look at your exterior walls, attics, and crawl spaces. If there's water pipes in there, you need to take precautions. Obviously, if it can freeze, then you get the water leak and you can cause problems. But imagine this is in your attic and you have a broken water pipe. And once the pipe freezes, it's not really a big deal because it's frozen. But as soon as it thaws out, that's when you get to start having water entry into the home. And if it's in the attic, then it's going to be soaking down all the sheetrock and insulation in the localized area. And you're going to come in the house and everything that was supposed to be on the ceiling is now on the floor, and it's all sitting in water. It's made a huge mess, things of that nature. So we want to make sure that we are cautious and are protecting our water pipes that are located in those areas. And if you're buying investment properties, it's worth your time and your effort to talk to a plumber or an inspector or somebody to help you identify where they actually are, and understand where your water valves are and make sure your water valves are functioning. Because a lot of times, I think homeowners have a leak in the house and they go to turn the water line off, and that's when they find out that the water line's that valve is not functional anymore. Either they can't turn it or it doesn't seal off the water, and in which case your next option for defense is actually to go out to the water main and turn the water off there. And so any of the pipes that are towards the exterior of the home, are vulnerable to that. And that includes your supply lines coming in the house. It includes any water lines that are coming from wells on the property, and any irrigation system that you have out there. So even your irrigation system, you need to winterize that by getting the water out of the system and opening up the solenoids to get some air into the lines. And what that does is that we all know that water expands, and we have problems with it when there's no place for that water when it freezes to expand to. If you put some air in the line, then as it freezes, it can compress that air, and it gives it a little bit of room to grow into the direction of the air without having to be confined, strictly by the pipe. Because when that happens, that's when the pipe is going to split. It's either going to crack in the middle, or it's going to crack at a joint. If it's PVC, it could be a glue joint, or if it's solid pipe, you might have usually going to have a problem in the straight line. But it just depends. It could be a weak section in the pipe that what fails. But at the end of the day, you don't care where it fails. You're going to be caring that it did fail, and what do I have to do to get this corrected? And anytime that this happens, it goes from being something that I wanted to fix or nice to fix or had time to fix to something that becomes an emergency very quickly. And here in the Houston area, which the area is prevalent to floods. We've all heard that, and I use it as a joke talking to clients that, hey, it hardly ever floods down here, but in the event that happens, we've all seen what a couple of inches of water can do to the inside of a house. All the sheetrock and insulation is out in the street. All your personal belongings are in the street. Same thing happens when it breaks a line in the wall of the house. Excuse me. It's caused a tremendous amount of damage. And if this happens overnight, you're not there until the next morning. It could be hours and hours that this is going on, and it's unfortunate when that happens. So methods that there's a couple of ways that you can prevent this. Insulation is usually the number one defense, and then if you can't protect it in such a way to ensure that it's not going to freeze, excuse me, then having heat tape, heating elements, or being able to heat the area would be something to look into, especially if you have a basement or a crawl space. And I think most of the folks that have been in a northern climate have probably seen the last couple of ones where you let a faucet drip so that there's water going through the line, because moving water doesn't freeze. Excuse me, I'm getting tickle in the back of my throat. So when it talks about letting it drip, it's not just a steady drip. That's not enough water. You actually need to have a little bit of water running, very small amount, just to make sure that it's moving. Open your cabinet doors. That lets the heat in the room and also prevents any freezing temperatures from happening inside that cabinet. Excuse me, I need to take a quick break. Let me get some water. I'm sorry about that.
We'll let Eric get a drink there. So thank you everybody for joining us. And don't forget, if you have your questions, go ahead and put them into the Q&A section of the information. You're right, Eric loves to answer questions, so feel free to ask away.
Heck yeah. All right, so let's see if we can get this going. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Let's open cabinet doors and leave the heat on. But if you have an opportunity to drain the system, especially from elevated piping, that's always a good opportunity as well. Man. So plumbing. So there's a couple of different types of insulation that we have out there: fiberglass, foam, and elastomeric foam. The bottom one is something that you see on AC cooling lines. And this stuff works pretty well because it helps to reduce the heat loss in the cooling line for your air conditioner, which is always a super bonus because we don't like to pay for electricity that's heating, that's being lost to the environment. But fiberglass is a good insulator. The elastomeric foam is good because it's a closed foam. The standard foam, which you find in Home Depot, it's cheap and a lot of people buy this stuff. This is a open foam. I'm sorry, the elastomeric foam is closed foam. So this regular foam, which means airflow readily moves through the regular foam, and you can get some heat loss that way. So if you have your opportunities, then either the elastomeric or the fiberglass are your insulation of choice. And if not, then you have to buy these heated cables. The picture that you see on the right-hand side, I pulled that off of Amazon. You can buy that stuff on Amazon up to, I think it's like 100 feet long that you can get those. And they plug into the wall, has a sensor that touches the pipe, and when it gets up to about gets below a certain temperature, it turns the element on. And you can either wrap it around the pipe, or you can just run it along the bottom of it or the top of it, just so it's in contact with it. And it heats up the pipe to a certain level, and obviously heats up the water inside. Once it gets to that a good temperature above freezing, then it cuts it off. So it's something that remains continuous. And in most cases, you'll hear, or if you read about it online, you'll see that 41 degrees is kind of the temperature that you're looking for inside an area to prevent water from freezing, because you can still have have it close to freezing, like a 35 degree or something like that, where the temperature is okay. But if there's any kind of breeze or airflow in there, then it drops the temperature just a little bit more. And certainly we've all experienced that when it's cold outside, step out with a brisk wind and it feels just a bit more chilly. And then finally, heating the space is something that you can consider. It does consume power. This is typically something you're going to buy an electric heater. This one that I have pictured, I think I found that on one of the industrial supply sites like Granger or something like that. This one was 7,500 BTU and it was about 160 bucks. So that's relatively inexpensive, but you're not trying to heat it up to being comfortable where humans want to be in there. You're just trying to keep a space above freezing. And this is something you could use in a crawl space or in an unfinished basement.
And Eric, that runs on electrical, correct?
That one does. They do have some larger ones that might run off gas or propane or something like that. But you have to be cautious about that, especially if you got an investment property and you've got an open flame that's running in a property that you're not at and may not have the ability to monitor.
Correct. And that's the main thing, knowing that, your vacant property is not going to be, nobody's going to be there while this is going on.
Yeah, and of course, go ahead.
I actually, on a couple of our rentals, one winter, I get a call from the neighbor across the street that our sprinkler system heads had popped. And that's probably some of the scariest things I've ever experienced, because when you have all your rentals side by side going off, yeah, that's not fun. So
Yep. Yeah. So you do have to protect the vacuum breaker that's part of the sprinkler system, and that requires you to drain the system. And you can visit, if you don't know how to do that and you want to know, go visit the University of YouTube. There are plenty of videos out there that show how to do it. Very simple process to take care of that. The only cautionary note I say when you have a heater in there is just be careful about where you put it when you install it. Just don't put any flammables or anything around it that might get hot or might catch on fire. It sounds like common sense, but a lot of times you get in a hurry to do this type of stuff because it's getting cold and you just weren't expecting it to maybe it's an early freeze or something of that nature. And so you're in a rush to get these things done and may not place them correctly. So just be careful about something like that. So let's talk about roofs. So this is super important as well, because the picture that I show there on the bottom is about the snow load on a house, and you can see that the roof is collapsed. And when in the construction trades, there are requirements for the architects and the builders to design the house in such a way that it's going to resist the snow load for areas that have heavy snow or have any kind of snow. And then the wind load. So because the wind actually puts pressure on the house too, and can cause problems with the structure of the home. And then we talk about insulation and roof geometry. So I did a little investigation on the weight of snow. Bottom of the screen, your nice fluffy dry snow weighs about 3 pounds per cubic foot. Wet snow can weigh as much as 21 pounds. And so the other thing is that when you buy roofing materials, if you guys aren't aware of that, it's measured in squares. And so a square is a 10 by 10 section. So when you are looking to put a roof on a house or something like that, your roofers are going to measure this in squares. So a square is 100 square feet. 1 foot of snow, 100 square feet. So that's 100 square feet times basically one. So you have 100 cubic feet of snow, weighs about 300 pounds. If it's dry snow, if it's wet snow, it's 2,100 pounds. So make that go 2 feet for heavy snow in the northern climates. And now we have wet snow per 100 square feet is 4,200 pounds. That's over 2 tons. So that's like the weight of a camera sitting on your roof.
Parking a Volkswagen on top of your house. That's
so
insane.
I just looked it up. The 2020 Camry weighs just a little extra. If you fully equip it with a V6, it weighs about 3,700 pounds. So
wow.
3,500 pounds or so is a Toyota Camry. Everybody knows what those are. So if you want to park a couple of those on your roof in the wintertime and see what happens, then don't do anything about the snow. And if you do get wet snow, and folks in the northern climates know what a wet snow is because it's nasty, then it is certainly something to be concerned about. But the construction of homes in the northern states take this into account. But also remember that we always make mistakes, and everybody's human. And when you're buying investment properties, you really don't know, because oftentimes we're buying an older home. And if you have any concerns about the structure of the attic, or if you do have it inspected and some questions come up about the attic, get it inspected by a structural engineer and get a licensed civil engineer to come out, take a look at it, and make sure that there's no issues with it. Okay. I thought there was something else I want to tell about this. The map that's on there. So I picked up that map off of one of the builders' websites, and what it does in different colors is it shows the color bands based upon where the snowfall rates are, and so that you can get an idea that if you're living in one of the northern climates, that you get an idea of what the impact of the snow is going to have on the structure of the home. So you tend to see when you get up in the New England states, and down in the South, our roofs look like that. You start to get into the New England states, and you start getting a lot more pitch on there because you're trying to make the snow just slide off of the house, and so it doesn't create a weight load on it. But what's interesting about this, so you look up in Maine, and you look up in, I guess that's going to be northern Minnesota, actually Wisconsin or the northern part of Michigan is a different color. Both of those areas are red, so they do get deep, deep snow in those areas. For those of you out west in California, you see it's all gray out there, so it's kind of like it is in Houston. It's like nobody cares because it never snows. But the other interesting part is you see in the middle states, Washington, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Nevada, Utah, Vegas and Arizona, those are in a gray area as well. And you're like, well, wait a minute, it snows in Utah, and doesn't it snow in Idaho and Montana? You bet it does. But those are areas that are affected by the Rocky Mountains. And so instead of having blanket comments in the residential code that says that a roof pitch and the structure of the attic needs to be built in a certain way in these states and climates, when you get in the Rocky Mountains, you get in areas where there's significant elevation, then local jurisdictions are required to have either an ordinance in a city, or the state is supposed to have some requirements that go beyond what's in the building code that specifies what's supposed to happen in those states where you have a much heavier snow demand up there. So based on where you're in the United States, you can kind of see what your snow load is and where you need to be concerned about it. The lighter blue areas are not a big deal in the northern and the southern states, but when you start getting up north, the middle climates that are light blue, the yellow, and certainly the red areas are on this map are going to be a little darker. Alaska's not on there, but for sure they're going to have a significant amount of structure in an attic to be able to handle the snow load that you're going to get up north in our most northern state.
And Eric, one thing here that you said earlier, you said structural engineer. I know you've looked at some of the properties that we've looked at that have fire damage. That's a great indicator to bring one of those professionals in, just so you don't.
It should, so exactly absolutely. It should go without saying that in your contracting services that the state requires, I know in Texas does, the licensed trades are heating and cooling, plumbers, electricians, home inspectors have to be licensed. So all of those are have to have a license, but so do your civil engineers. If you're going to be working with properties that the public is related to, so either commercial or residential, your civil engineer, your structural engineers have to have a professional engineering license and licensed by that state. And so that's certainly somebody that you want to have on your dial, your maybe not on your quick dial list, but it needs to be in your phone. Have a civil engineer that you can call to come out and look at your problems when you see something like that, and have an idea of what the cost is going to be ahead of time, whether it's foundation or attics or something like that. What we're going to cover next is about roofs, and specifically about an ice dam. And certainly people in the northern states have probably heard about this, maybe not understand the mechanisms of how it occurs. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, and also how you can prevent it. So what we see in the diagram, an ice dam is where you have a section of the roof that gets warm, and the snow that's between the roof and the snow that's on top of it melts. And that water runs down between that thin layer between the snow and the roof, and it gets down to the eaves where there's no insulation, and that area is frozen, and it's well below freezing in that area. And when that water gets down to that section of the roof, it freezes. And over a period of time, that water gets up there, and it creates what's known as an ice dam, where all of the snow and the ice at the bottom of that on that eave is solid. And so it won't allow the snow to come off, and it won't allow any more water to get off. And so the snow continues to melt, it runs down the roof, and it gets to this area where it says, where you see in blue, where it says dammed water. And that water just sits there. And you're just soaking those, whatever your roof type is, whether it's asphalt shingles or metal roof, or whether it's a clay tile, which is unlikely in the northern states, but it's just some sort of type of roof covering. That water just sits there. It deteriorates the roofing shingle. It starts to migrate underneath the shingles, because our shingles are designed to allow water to run off of it at an angle. But when you just have that water just sitting there, it just migrates back under it via capillary action, gets up to the underlayment, soaks that down, gets to the decking, gets that wet, starts rotting. It gets soaking, it gets the rafters wet. And then you start getting water running down on the inside of the structure, the attic, to the walls. And there's that first flat spot that the water's coming down, and then it just spreads out, and it starts soaking down the wall. And that's when you're going to have water stains on the ceilings in the corners. Your sheetrock or whatever your interior finishes are going to get wet. You're going to get that musty smell. You're going to get that dampness smell in the house. You're going to start seeing deterioration. And this can happen in a period of weeks. And when it stays cold like this for weeks at a time in the northern climates, and this is occurring, this can happen over a winter, and you can certainly have some problems in there, and it just gets worse over time. It compresses the insulation. It gets wet, stays wet. It's not freezing inside the wall because there is some heat from the structures getting to that, and it just stays wet. Everything's wet, and it just becomes a nasty environment. Inside the wall, there's no airflow, and it starts making the inside of the house problematic. If things are wet, you've got electrical wires in there. You maybe get water in your switches, your outlet boxes. If you have any wall mounted lighting or anything that's on the wall, you can start getting those wet. So why do we care? We care because it damages the structure of the home. When it damages the structure of the home, then we can have problems that we've talked about. But we can certainly have issues where the structure becomes weak, and you can have some type of catastrophic failure at some point. So how do you tell how do you know when this is occurring? This is how you know. When you start seeing icicles on the side of your house, we always think these are cool, break them off, play with them, throw them around, act like we're gonna make a dart out of them or an arrow or something like that. If you start seeing this, you're getting ice dams up on that roof, and you've got a problem, and it needs to be corrected. And like I said, what's happening is on that lower section of the roof where your soffit is and the eaves are at, that stays at the outside temperature because there's no insulation or anything there. And all that ice and snow on the end of that stays frozen. But a little bit always migrates underneath it, and you get some water off the edge of it, and you get icicles. And we see that, then that's when you need to be concerned. And if you see that many, I mean, one or two of them, okay, need to pay attention, need to check on this, see if it's going to warm up anytime soon, and go take a look at this, because you'll be able to notice this if it's staying wet. But if you see something like that and you know that there's a problem there, that should be a red flag. So mitigation. I think I'm a little bit over here, so I'm going to go through this really quick. So things that you want to do is you want to make your attic cold. It has to be between the insulation and the roof. You got to make it below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. That is absolutely important. And ways you can do that is to seal up all your penetrations in the ceiling. Make sure the insulation is thick. You do have to be cautious that if you have any sort of recessed lighting up there, that it is the type that is allowed to have insulation on top of it. If not, then you have to get an auxiliary can that goes over the top of it that prevents that. So if you have these open light fixtures, that heat comes up there and it heats the attic up, and that's where we can melt the snow that's on the roof. So we want to ensure that we have sufficient insulation and increase the attic ventilation so that we're pulling that cold air from the outside into the attic. And as we all know, heat rises, gets to the top of the roof, and it escapes. So if we're pulling that cold air in, we have good ventilation and good insulation on there, then we're going to make sure that we're going to keep the underside of that roof decking cold for as long as it needs to be. Those are the easy ones to do. They're less costly. If not, then you're going to be out there putting on an ice barrier underneath the roof covering, which is a rubberized elastomeric material that you put down on the lower sections of the roof. You can only do this when you're installing a roof. If you have to do this after the fact, it's going to be expensive, and this stuff does cost more, but it's certainly worth the money. If you're putting a roof on the house, on your investment properties, even your personal home, this is good stuff. They put a nail through it or a screw through it, it automatically seals it. You don't get that water penetration. It's self-adhesive, so it sticks to the roof decking and it seals itself. This stuff is well worth the money to put it on there. Otherwise, you're going to be out there trying to get that snow off of the roof along with that ice, which is going to be difficult. You're going to be up there on a ladder in the cold. And this is not fun work. And then lastly, putting heating cables on above the roof eaves to melt that ice and get rid of it. Make sure that it gets down off the roof or runs down into the gutter so you can get it off of the roof. So those are the ways that you can do it. The mitigations, the ones at the top are less expensive. The ones as you get towards the bottom tend to cost more. So I've got 7:15, so 5 minutes over. So I want to open up the floor for discussion. How do we want to handle this, Diego?
All right. So first, let's take a look. We had a couple questions that came through here. On the chat, I think we had, give me a second here. We had a question from Mr. Herman. It said, if you have a 40-year-old or greater, 40-year or greater house and the pipes are galvanized because the age of the house, should you be thinking about replacing them?
Galvanized pipe is always a challenge. Corrodes from the inside out. It's certainly, if you're walking the property, this should be something that you should consider in your rehab budget to make sure that you account for it in the house before you buy it, because you don't want to end up having to repipe a house to the tune of $7,000 to $9,000 after you've bought the house, because then of course that comes right out of your profit. But galvanized pipe is always an issue because it does corrode from the inside out, and it can cause leaks and cause corrosions, but it has the nasty habit of plugging the leaks when they start. They usually start small, and then a little piece of corrosion gets in there and it plugs the hole and it doesn't leak. And then a little while later, a couple months, a couple of years later, it leaks again, leaks for a little while, plugs itself, and then it does that over time, and it keeps resealing itself, and then eventually you end up with a leak, and that's when it's catastrophic. So I would certainly consider that based upon your exit strategy, and if you have the opportunity to possibly renegotiate with the seller a little bit of price difference to cover your costs for that, and maybe you take a little pinch on your profit and they get a reduced price for it, then you can make that work. If not, if you're allowed to reduce the price by the full amount and they're still willing to accept your offer, then that leaves your profit intact. But I would certainly be thinking about it if you've got a house that has galvanized pipe.
All right. And here's another question. If you have weep holes around the house, How far above the ground should they be?
Have the what on the house?
Weep holes?
Weep holes are supposed to be between whatever the foundation is, typically is a slab house or a perimeter cement. So the weep holes should be at the base, and they're required to be 33 inches apart. And between the brick and the soil, you should have a minimum of 4 inches. So if you want to say the weep holes need to be 4 inches above the soil, that's a good number. That is what's required in the residential code for clearance between the soil and the exterior cladding of the home.
Okay. And we had a question here. And guys, don't hesitate to put questions in your Q&A part of the Zoom dashboard. And Thao Hagen. Hey, Thao, how are you? She asked, does Texas general contractors require to be licensed?
General contractors, no. So as I said, the only trades that are required to be licensed are heating and cooling, plumbers and electricians. If you ever buy a property, whether it's your personal home or an investment property, what is the absolute first thing you're supposed to do? Change the locks, right? People don't think about it, but that's it, right? That's my house. Now I don't know whose has keys. In Texas, locksmiths are required to be licensed by the DPS. A lot of people don't know that. Call your locksmith, come in and change your locks, whatever. Ask him if he has a license, what his license number is. And the same thing with your contractors, the three that are required to be licensed. Ask what their license number is. And in Texas, you can look them up. Most states, you can look up their license, find out if it's active. If they don't have an active license, they don't have insurance. They don't have insurance, you don't want to do business with them.
Okay. And let's see here. This is a question from me to you, I guess more of a point of discussion, is when you're walking a property and let's say you're looking at it with an investor, what would be the top 3 or 4 things that you want to identify as these are going to be possible headaches?
I think investment properties is the same as what it is for a personal property. For real estate, what do you call it? Retail real estate, the other term for it. The big 3 things that either are expensive to fix or replace in a house are roofs, foundations, and air conditioners.
Okay.
Roofs, replacing a roof, shingle roof or whatever is probably $10,000 or $15,000 on your average house. Repairing foundations, 5 to 10. Air conditionings is probably about $5,000 per unit. If that's a 2.5 ton or so, that's a good system. So those are always going to be the heavy hitters in the house. Now, a lot of times we walk in a house and we think, man, I want to remodel this kitchen. I want to put a new master bath suite in there and stuff like that. And I had an instance where I inspected an investment property. They went through the whole process, rehabbed the house, got it on the market. Buyer's real inspector came out and said, hey, got all these problems with the roof. And when the investor called me and asked me some questions about it to look at their pictures and stuff, they admitted, she says, I completely ignored all of your suggestions on roof repairs, and now it's come back to bite me. So if your inspectors tell you about that stuff, at least put some thought in it. If you decide that you're not going to fix it, then have an expectation of what you're going to do when you go to put that house on the market and how you're going to get out of that. In this case, they ended up the options were they were either going to replace the roof or they weren't going to reduce the price. So they said, look, we're going to put a roof on the house, and they had to replace an air conditioner as well. So they did that too, and they raised the price of the house by $12,000.
All right.
The buyers ended up buying it. They got a brand new roof out of it.
All right. Thao says, hello, Eric. Hello, Diego. She's awesome. So here's something that you recommend sometimes, and I think it's such a neat strategy. You're doing a rehab, and then you're going to order this inspection, right? You're saying this is a way to order it, or who orders it, in order to help your contractor understand that they still have some things to do, that you can use it towards the benefit of kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Can you talk a little bit about that?
There's a couple of things that you touched on there. One of the biggest concerns is that anything that, as an inspector, my responsibility is to tell you what's wrong with the house. If I tell you about it and you want to go and sell that house, you have to disclose that information, that what was told to you as a defect. So let's say you're going to wholesale the house, right? So if you really want to, if you want to know what's wrong with it, and maybe you wanted to you're originally going to flip the house, but you found out there was a lot of problems with it. Now you're going to go wholesale the house. You're obligated in most states by law to tell the buyer what you know about that house. So you have to be cautious about that, about what you're going to do when you're going to order, ask for an inspection. Other thing is if you're a realtor, if you're a realtor, then you have some additional ethics that you have to abide by each state. And as investors, we always teach people to follow a code of ethics as well, and to make sure that you treat people fairly and honestly, including the people that you're trying to buy their house. You're trying not to, rob them of their house and things like that. But as a strategy, if you got a buyer that's being unreasonable about the price, and you actually do get an inspection on the house and you're going to rehab it, and you know that, and that's your exit strategy, you can use that inspection report to inform them about what the defects are in the home, and have some information as to why your offer is where it is. It's not that they have to take your word for it. They have an inspection report that they can refer to, and you can give it to them and show it to them, because it's not any secrets or anything like that that you want to hold from them. And you can tell them, hey, get your own inspection and see if they do that. But once they have had that inspection, then they're now made aware of those defects. They have to disclose that to anybody that's looking to buy the house. But there are a few inspectors that we work with in the Houston area who are realtors that are working on flipping properties, rehabbing them, and they have their contractors order the inspections, so that the inspection information and all this defects and stuff go to the contractor, and so that he makes sure that he fixes those things. And there's a layer of information blocking, if you want to call it that, because the contractor is not obligated to tell their client that the inspector found all these things in there, because he's going to fix them anyway.
Mhm.
And so that allows the seller, who's going to be the owner, your investor, to say that when he fills out the disclosure, he's not aware of some of the issues that may have been brought up in the inspection report because he wasn't told about it. And so the contractor is the one that's doing it to make sure that he's going to repair the house, and the quality of his repairs are going to be the best that he can provide. It's nothing underhanded in that case. And one of the houses I did inspect for an investor who's also a realtor, when you do that disclosure, they're going to ask you, are you aware of an inspection that has been completed on the house in the last year? And in this case, the answer was yes. So they called me and said, what am I supposed to put in this form? What do I tell them? And I said, you tell them what you're supposed to tell them, and you be honest that you had an inspection done. And this was done prior to the house being rehabbed. And the purpose was to find out what was wrong with the house so that I could fix it. So showing a client that's going to buy the retail product of that house this inspection report that was done before the house was fixed doesn't really matter, because they fixed everything. And the other thing that's important about it is that most inspectors are going to tell you that that inspection report is valid the day the inspection was done, because who knows what happened the next day. We had a hard freeze that night and the pipes burst. So a lot of things in the house changed, or the next 2 days later, the furnace caught on fire and burnt the house to the ground. So that inspection report is no longer valid anymore. It's especially after you've done a rehab on the property. But at the end of the day, look at what's in that report and make sure you fix those things, because are you going to have to defend yourself on the other side of that? And the same investor, like I was talking about, they didn't repair any of the things on the roof or address any of the issues that I identified. And so when they went to go sell the house, that kind of came back and bit them on the butt, saying, hey, I didn't fix all this stuff. Now the buyer wants me to go fix this roof.
Well, we got another question here from Herman Walker. It says, if a house has a heaved slab, would it be costly to fix, or should you not worry about fixing it?
Well, you want to get a quote. And my recommendation is always contact a civil engineer to look at the foundation, because they're going to look at things like grading and drainage around the home. Also look at vegetation. So if there's any big trees or lots of bushes and stuff like that that may be causing pressure on that foundation. And they can also put a mitigation strategy and a repair strategy in. If you call a foundation company out there, they typically want to recommend repairs. Not always, but at the end of the day, that's what their business is, to fix foundations. So they see foundations that need repair almost everywhere they turn. And a civil engineer has no vested interest in whether your house needs repairs or not. And so they're going to tell you the straight scoop, and their license is relying on they're telling you the truth of what's going on there. So if you believe you have a heaved slab, especially if you've had it inspected and have an inspector tell you something about that, then call a civil engineer out and get a formal evaluation, because it carries more weight. And as I said, they can put together a repair plan, and then you can have the foundation companies bid on that job and know that you're not being, because you come out there a lot of times, one foundation says you need 10 piers, another one says 15, another one says you need 20, and one says you 12. It's like, what do I really need? Civil engineer is going to tell you how many you need, because his license is on the line for him being wrong.
Okay, so we have people attending from around the country.
Okay.
What would be, if you were to tell them, these are probably the 2 or 3 main questions that you want to ask and when you're interviewing an inspector, that would kind of give you not 100% let's work with you, but kind of puts you in the right direction with them? What would they?
Well, number one would be, have you worked with inspectors before? Do you know what we do, how we do it, and why we do it? All those type of questions, because it's a different market. And being on the backside of the transaction with investors, is with somebody who's paid too much for the house and had to shortcut repairs, is not where the inspector wants to be. And oftentimes they get that way. So I would certainly make sure that they understand what your business is and understand your exit strategies and how they can help you. And they should know that up front. You shouldn't be the one that's teaching them unless you just want to, unless you've got the time for that. But they should put forth the effort to understand what your business is. Other thing is, ask about their licensing, what sort of certifications that they have. Are they licensed or certified to inspect pools and spas? Can they do thermal camera inspections? What can they do for foundations? All that kind of stuff. And then, how many houses have you inspected?
There you go. That's a big one. Yes.
And a lot of people don't ask me. I've only been asked that twice. How many houses have you inspected? And when I first started inspections, the thing I was so afraid of is Diego gives me a call and says, "Hey, I'd like you to inspect my house. Blah, 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 blah. How many have you done?" He's like, "Diego, man, it's awesome. I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to inspect your house. This is going to be the second house I inspected."
Well, I could tell you, when from the properties that you've inspected for us, you even inspected my personal house. I mean, my wife, you were like, forget it. We're getting this house. Eric's been here. Awesome. It's like, don't need to worry about anything. Yeah. So I highly, highly recommend it, guys. Eric's information is right here on the screen for you guys to call him, send him an email, check out his webpage. He's very, very informative, whether you work with him or not. I mean, I believe he also values the fact that you're an informed consumer, because at the end of the day, you want to buy something correctly, and because Eric doesn't want to lead you down the wrong path. So Eric, if we don't have any more questions, I really want to thank you again for your information. Also being, a straight shooter with us, because that in the real estate world, that's what we need. We need to make sure we don't sugarcoat things and talk about the correct things that happen and dealing with real estate. So we really want to thank you again, sir.
Hey, you're welcome. Happy to help. I enjoy it.
Absolutely, guys. Don't forget to visit us to learn more about us on investorrealestatetraining.com. You'll learn more about SVI, and also if you want to go ahead and scan the QR code, it'll give you some more information about StratiVentures. And also, Eric, your webinar is going to be posted in all of our social media, so don't hesitate to like us and subscribe. And then we also have our up and coming webinars are going to be there at the investorrealestatetraining.com. So say hi to Miss Nancy for me and everybody that joined us this evening. Don't forget that it's every other Monday that we're having our webinars. So next week we won't have a webinar, but the weekend after that, the Monday after next Monday, we're going to have it. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. And Thal, thank you again for your nice comments, and everybody enjoy your family. So we'll see you guys 2 weeks from now.
See you later, Diego. Thanks, man.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Have a good evening.